Evening, everyone.
All righty. You are now live.
Good evening, everyone. And welcome to the February 28th meeting of the Newcastle Planning Commission. We will start with a roll call, and I don't know how to do this in any particular order over Zoom. So I will start and just jump in. Gail Seitz,
Kristen Zumar,
John Lafferty,
Cynthia Batty,
Vera Worthy,
Matthew Lovely,
Tara, you're on mute.
Oh, oopsie, Tierra Fania Ruiz.
All right, well, it sounds like we have a quorum. So we will start with the approval of the minutes, which you should have received in your packet. Are there any comments or corrections? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion.
Vera Worthy, make a motion that we accept the minutes as they are written with necessary corrections, should there be any.
I need a second.
A second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 I have to abstain. I wasn't
Ditto.
there.
All right, Cynthia, why don't you welcome, first of all, and why don't you share a little bit of information about yourself, where you live, anything else you would like to share with the group?
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. I think I know some of you. It's nice to be here and to have the trust and confidence of the mayor and the city council to help contribute to this group. I think I have very big shoes to fill from William Walters. I regret I never met him. I wish I had. But I will certainly do my best to contribute and not be too obnoxious. How's that for a pledge? We live, my husband Mark and I live at 18 East 3rd Street in the historic district. It's the house that was renovated by the Applebee's. So you all may know that beautiful, extraordinary house, which it's the first time I ever moved into a place and it was better than I thought it was going to be. So it's been great to be here. I have a very long career in business and management and also in the arts. My professional education is as an artist, but I've been involved in IT operations and consulting for most of my career. And I also have a lot of experience having been on a condominium board, which is it's probably more thankless than this job. So, but you learn a lot when you see what happens when people get together and attempt to agree on something. So for better or worse, that's in my past. I've also worked for a lot of nonprofits as executive director and other things in my copious spare time. So I'm hoping what I know and have experienced will contribute something to all of you. And thank you for making me welcome. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And hopefully, it sounds like next month we will see you in person.
That'll be fun. And we'll have a love-in. I think I heard that was going to happen.
All right, next on the agenda, and this is something I've been on Planning Commission for a while, but I'm not sure that I have dealt with an amendment to the code or ordinances that are amending the code. And I've asked Chris Rogers as our planning consultant or the planning consultant to the city to join us tonight to share some background on both of these ordinances. the first one is really coming to us from city council, or the majority of it is coming from city council. And there is a provision in the code, and I found it, that says an amendment initiated by council, when an amendment, supplement, change, modification, or repeal is initiated by council, it shall first submit the proposal to the planning commission for review and recommendations. So the first one is coming to us from council. And so tonight we are charged with making a recommendation to council. So we can recommend that we approve, we can recommend that we don't approve, we can recommend that we approve with some some things for council to consider as part of the ordinance. I think they had a first reading of this ordinance 2 meetings ago. And so following our recommendation tonight, there should be a second reading as well as public comment. And then we'll see where it goes from there. So Chris, would you like to give us some background on this first ordinance?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Chris Rogers with AECom. I'm the city planner. I see that Dan Lasko, city attorney, is also on the meeting in case we have any legal questions. Ordinance 534, as the chair said, was originated for the most part by city council to amend the makeup of the Board of Adjustment. And secondly, to add stricter penalties for violations of certain approvals granted by the Board of Adjustment. I should have backed up a little bit. In addition to those 2 issues regarding Ordinance 534, there's another change. And the Planning Commission has been talking about various changes to the zoning ordinance for over about a year now. And some of the changes that are encompassed in Ordinance 534 are changes that the Planning Commission has been considering for some time. And the city thought it appropriate to roll in those changes because they impacted the Board of Adjustment section into this ordinance, where the city council wanted to change the makeup of the Board of Adjustment. So in general, Ordinance 534 changes the makeup of the Board of Adjustment from, which is currently consists of the city engineer, the city attorney, and the mayor, to 4 individuals and the mayor. And there's different various conditions for those individuals in order to be appointed to the Board of Adjustment. Now, for those of you that are relatively new to the Planning Commission, you're wondering like what the Board of Adjustment does. The Board of Adjustment is a requirement of the state law. And in general, the Board of Adjustment has various powers. Number 1, the Board of Adjustment has authority to review administrative appeals of decisions by city staff. I see Jeff Bergstrom, the building inspector, code enforcement officer on the meeting. If Jeff, in his capacity as the zoning administrator, were to make a decision regarding the interpretation of the zoning ordinance, anyone would have the opportunity to appeal his decision. That appeal would go to the Board of Adjustment for an administrative review. The Board of Adjustment also has the authority to approve what's called special exceptions. Special exceptions are unique uses that are generally permissible in various zones, but because of the nature of the uses and the nature of the zones, they are labeled and described as special exceptions, and whereby they are considered on a case-by-case basis by the Board of Adjustment at a public hearing, and the Board of Adjustment can consider those special exceptions and add conditions unique to the site. The third power of the Board of Adjustment is to hear and decide upon variances to the zoning ordinance. If someone wants to build a building higher than is permitted in the zoning ordinance, then they could apply for a variance to the Board of Adjustment. And there's very specific criteria that the board has to consider when considering the variance. There's also use variances. Those are, we don't see them a lot, but the state law does allow variances to allow a use that is not allowed by right in a certain zone. It could be allowed by a variance by the Board of Adjustment. I'm going to turn it over to Dan to discuss the nature of the makeup of the changes regarding the makeup of the Board of Adjustment and the addition of penalties. But I wanted to add that the changes in ordinance 534 that the Planning Commission has been kicking around for some time deal with the criteria that the Board of Adjustment must consider when it's considering special exceptions. And those are found in section 2. It's on the second page of ordinance 534, 230-57B2. So I'm not going to read all of those, but those are, again, this is very unique situation. Those are generally criteria that were buried in the ordinance, and they only apply to special exceptions in one particular zone. And the Planning Commission thought that those criteria that apply to that one zone for a special exception should be universal in nature and should be applied to all zones. And they're very, very general in nature. You know, they have to deal, the Board of Adjustment has to consider the suitability of the property, to assure that the proposal is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of this chapter. You know, those types of general universal criteria, making sure that the special exception doesn't have a negative impact on adjacent properties. Up until now, the Planning Commission hasn't been involved in the those changes in 534 that deal with the Board of Adjustment makeup or the penalties, and turn it over to Dan to briefly describe those changes.
Thank you, Chris. Madam Chair and members of the commission, I'm Dan Losco. I'm the city solicitor. I've been working for the city for about 11 years now. Chris has already mentioned that this particular ordinance has its genesis coming from 3 different directions. The one he just summarized was the fact that the certain special exception conditions or requirements were discussed in the DG zoning section of our zoning code, but they did not appear as to any other zones. And so the thought, and a logical one from the Planning Commission, was to have that transferred over to section 230-57, which speaks in general about the Board of Adjustment and its jurisdiction to grant special exceptions. So that was probably the most, the simplest and most clear-cut and black and white type of move that made a lot of sense. The other 2 come from different genesis, if you will. The first one is the penalties and conditions for breaching conditions. when the Board of Adjustment renders a decision, whether it's for a variance, whether it's for a special exception, it can impose conditions. Things like landscaping requirements along fences, or maybe it's limitations on the size of a building or parking requirements, something along those lines. So that when we permit somebody by variance, for example, to do something that's not otherwise permitted by code, we can add conditions to soften the impact, any negative perceived impact of making that change. What we ran into in the not too distant past was a situation where a resident had secured a special exception with conditions, and they related to landscaping, which this particular owner promptly ignored, literally within a matter of weeks after implementing the special exception use. And it brought into clear focus the fact that our code really had no teeth in it with respect to enforcing conditions. We could have rushed into the Court of Chancery and sought an injunction to stop this person from doing something, but that's a massive undertaking, and it's a lengthy court battle and an expensive court battle. And so we were looking for a monetary way to fine someone for failing to abide by those kinds of conditions. So what's been implemented in this particular ordinance, and this is toward the end of the ordinance, especially in subsection F, 23057F, you will see that if a person fails to abide by a condition, the building official can send them a notice, and I believe it's 20 days to correct the violation after they receive notice. If they don't correct that violation within that period of time, they start incurring a fine of $100 per day. So what we've done here is to translate this from an equitable matter where we have to rush into court seeking an injunction, a very iffy and expensive proposition, and converted it to a fining situation. And you'll see also in this section that any fines under this particular section represent a lien on the real estate involved, just like your real estate taxes represent a lien. And what that does is give the city the ability to compel a tax sale of the property if there is non-compliance with the condition. So the goal here isn't to take somebody's property. The goal is to coerce them into complying with the condition involved. So even if they've been fined, if they comply, nobody's taking their property to a sheriff's sale. But in the worst case scenario, the fine will continue to accrue and it will authorize us to go to court and literally have the property auctioned off by the sheriff for non-compliance. So kind of a draconian result, perhaps, but only after other efforts to mitigate the situation have been exhausted. And this is a type of provision that exists elsewhere in our code for various other fines that represent liens on the real estate. An example is excessive consumption of inspections. There's a code violation issued by our code enforcement folks. Maybe it's for tall grass or trash in the yard, and they're given a period of time to correct it. If they don't correct it, the inspector will keep coming out daily if necessary to see if it's been corrected. And each visit to the property represents an additional fine, which ultimately will be a lien on the property that will allow us to exert some serious repercussions for failing to correct the violation. So this is similar to that, and it's to address that situation where we really didn't have any clout to enforce the conditions that the board imposed. And those are important conditions because oftentimes you will find somebody comes to the Board of Adjustment asking for some type of relief from the code, and neighbors will come out complaining. The neighbor might complain about excessive light coming from the property. And so we might impose a condition that all exterior lighting have a downward cast to it. Maybe, it could be a variety of things, but what the board is trying to do is to address those community concerns while also doing its best to accommodate the property owner and allow them to use their property for a reasonable purpose that it might otherwise be permitted, for example, a special exception. The last component of this is a real change in the entire makeup of the Board of Adjustment. in our code and even in the state code, it will say that if a municipality can develop its own Board of Adjustment, but if it doesn't, then the Board of Adjustment by default is the city lawyer, the city engineer, and the mayor. And we have operated under that basis for the entire history of the city, frankly. And I don't know of any major problems with that, but one of our council members who also works for the county felt that the perception was bad, that these outsiders, the lawyer and the engineer who don't live in town, are rendering decisions that affect the residents of the city and their properties. And so his feeling was that it'd be better if city residents were primarily involved in making those kind of decisions. And in truth be told, there is a mix of communities. Some do use a citizen Board of Adjustment. Some use that default of the solicitor, the engineer, and the mayor. I think both work just equally well, frankly, but I don't think there's been any major issues with the Board of Adjustment. I would say probably 95% of applications that come before the Board of Adjustment get approved with or without conditions. So I don't think there was a groundswell of opposition, but there certainly was a council member and at least one or two members of the public that liked the optics of having residents render these decisions. Now that means these residents need to be aware of what the legal standards are for granting an area variance versus a use variance versus a special exception. And it will require some training, some ongoing training, both with respect to procedures and how hearings are conducted, with respect to the legal standards involved and the court decisions that have interpreted those legal standards. And the point is, there'll be a learning curve. And there's some level of concern on my end that folks will make gut decisions as opposed to applying the strict letter of the law. If they like it, they'll approve it. If they don't, they won't, kind of thing, versus looking at the multiple prongs of a legal test that have to be satisfied before a variance or a special exception is granted. That being said, it can be done. And this is something that there is interest in on council. And so I drafted the ordinance for your review. I don't know if you all have any questions for me at this point. I'll stop talking though. Ms. Batty, I see your hands up.
Yes, I have questions. So 23053 and 23057 can be decoupled, correct?
23053 and 57. Not exactly. I mean, they're in the same general area of the code that addresses the Board of Adjustment itself. 53 talks about the creation and who's a member, and you get through to 57, and now you're talking about the specific jurisdiction of the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
So it's all in the same area.
Okay, but I mean, if we were to make a recommendation, we don't have to recommend, they're not coupled in our recommendation, correct?
Oh, if you mean to say you approve of 53, but not 57, absolutely. You can recommend whatever you feel is appropriate.
Okay, so then I do have an opinion, but I also have a question. In 57F3B, it says that fines shall be the joint and several obligation of the legal title holder to the real property and any tenant or occupant. Is that typical? As I'm ignorant, is that typical?
Well, I'll tell you why I did it this way in this particular case. Because often, we're talking about land use, and that use is either going to be code compliant or not code compliant. And if we have a tenant out there in occupancy of a property, they're the one who's using it, either in compliance or non-compliance, right? So I not only want that tenant occupant to comply, but the owner has the ability to coerce compliance on his tenant. Most leases will say that a tenant must use this property in compliance with the law. And if not, it's a breach of lease and they can take action. So the goal isn't really to penalize an innocent landowner, but it is to gain a little leverage to get things rectified.
Okay. Thank you for that. In section 8, second reading, there's a typo. Probably somebody noticed already, but in the word February. But then in reading this, I heard about this before I came to serve with you guys. And I thought this was something that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. We have very few people to pick from who can come and sit in these things, who have the time to go and learn about all these various things they need to learn about. We have other boards, notably HAC, where citizens are making decisions not always to the liking of the people who appeal to them. And it puts personalities into it, which I think is not advisable in a small community. I looked into it a little bit. We have 99% positive feedback and approvals or denials, but nobody's gotten upset about it. So I question why this adds value. If it's working the way it is, why change it?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
I would say that's usually a good way to govern stuff.
Well, some of the points you've raised, I raised before council when this was discussed. I have a concern that in a town of 5,500 people or so, you have many of them children or elderly or disabled. So you have a relatively narrow group of folks, and many of those people who are civic minded like you folks are already on boards or commissions. So you may find it challenging to find 4 people on top of your mayor who are willing to serve 3-year terms. The Board of Adjustment isn't just an advisory outfit. They're making real decisions. And if they're wrong, they get appealed into court. And we've had appeals into court for people dissatisfied with the result of their hearing. So it is concerning to me that when you have such a small slender of a potential pool of people who can be members, that there's a darn good chance that you're going to see a lot of recusals. My friend is coming before the board. I have to step back. I can't vote on this one. Or I'm a coworker here, or this is a friend or a relative, so I'm not going to vote on this one. That's one thing. And the second point that you raised that I also raised with council is that the Board of Adjustment decisions, some of them are pretty big and hotly contested. We all remember the 3rd Street parking lot battle. Now, if you're a member of the public and you thought that was a good idea, a certain element of our community would have really given you a very, very, very difficult time. Whereas the city engineer and the city lawyer could get in their car and drive home at night. Didn't have to see people on the street or at the local restaurants necessarily. So there's something to be said for objectivity of third parties who don't really have any skin in the game. They're just going to call it like they see it. When you're a resident, you do have skin in the game. And that decision might be colored by political, pressure from your neighbors and friends, or, whatever. So those are things that concern me, both finding people who are willing to serve, willing to learn the rules, willing to stick their neck out and be the, somebody who is attacked publicly for an unpopular decision. And then recusals are a problem, I think. And just that political pressure is concerning to me. That being said, when all this was raised, the answer I got was that it's bad optics to have outsiders making these decisions. That was kind of the result that I heard. There wasn't any real criticism with the board as it exists now, or that the decisions that it's rendering now, but it was, our residents should really be calling these shots and not these outsiders. From my perspective, it won't really matter. I'll be at these Board of Adjustment hearings anyway. I write the decisions. I have to answer legal issues that come up. I have to swear in witnesses. So it's not a matter of cost on my end. I'm still going to be there. It's really these other points that you've raised, Ms. Beth.
Anyone else?
This is Bree. I had just a quick question in reference to that. Is it possible to maybe make a recommendation that instead of 4, there's maybe 2? residents so that they do have a voice on the committee, but we can still keep sort of the existing format of it.
You know, that's an interesting idea. That could be done. Nobody's raised that issue before. So you're thinking that the existing Board of Adjustment, same members, but we would expand it to 2 more resident members, right?
Yes. And that
Okay.
way,
No-
I mean, you have
nobody's
at least 5
discussed that,
members,
but-
so there would be a tiebreaker potentially if there is an issue on a vote.
Well, yeah, there's the mayor too. The mayor would be the 5th voting member there. So
Mhm.
we should have an odd number of members if we can help it. That's an idea. That's an interesting idea that I haven't heard raised. And that could be one of your recommendations, for example.
So Dan, this is Gail. I found Title 22 where it talks about the makeup. And, I just wanted to make sure as I was reading through the different options, I saw the option that we have now. I saw the 5-person. I saw something about a 3 to 5 person board. But some of them said, not someone currently in office or running for office or have legislative. And so I was even questioning if the mayor was okay. I guess the mayor doesn't have legislative responsibilities.
That's
But
correct.
to make sure that whatever we recommend adhere to the state.
Yeah, it won't be a problem. Number one is that since we have home rule, our charter really controls this.
Okay.
And the state code authorizes us to basically adopt any Board of Adjustment that we want. If we fail to do it, we default to the mayor, the solicitor, the engineer. In fact, our code right now defaults to just that. So what do y'all think?
Hi,
Yeah.
it's Mar. I'm going to say I agree with Bree in having maybe 2 members within the city in addition to the existing makeup. I think that for continuity of people coming on and off, it would be best to have people who have the background in there who would know more possibly about what resources to direct the citizens to who are on the board and that type of thing. Because like you said, it's going to be a big learning curve when you first start training. So I just wanted to, I'd support Bree's recommendation.
I also would support that recommendation. I think that's a great way to add the community input and also have the expertise still available. And I think Cynthia's points and Dan's points are very valid to consider. I don't know how far we are down the road with this. I mean, is city council expecting us to just kind of bless this and move on, or are we actually at a point where it can be modified?
It can be modified, but this is going to be scheduled for a public hearing, second reading and vote at the March 8th council meeting.
But isn't there also public input at that meeting? So they are
Yes.
still considering our recommendation as well as public input.
Correct. They would take your recommendation. They'll do their public hearing before the council meeting on the 8th. And then they'll enter into their council meeting where there'll be discussion and vote, second reading, discussion and vote.
All right.
It could be tabled and the ordinance can be amended before the final vote too, if that's the thought.
Well, changing it from 4 to 2 is like a 1-word change. So, or maybe it happens in 2 places. It's
Yeah.
not a really big change. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about 2 versus 0, but is our role to make a unanimous recommendation?
Well, it doesn't have to be unanimous, but your recommendation should be, carried by a majority of the commission.
Well, 2 is better than 4, Bree. Thank you for that. Good thinking.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
that,
figured, I thought it would be a good compromise, and it also, appeases people's concerns, because I was at the meeting when this was brought up, the city council meeting. And so there were some very passionate people who felt like they wanted to have more of a voice on some of these decisions. And that was supported by at least one of the council members there. And so I think allowing them to have a limited number of representatives would probably be a really good compromise and allow them to still have that voice that they want.
Yeah, it sounds like a good compromise to me. I had the same concerns. I mean, besides all the commissions and the committees, and we also have the Historic Area Commission, we also have the trustees. And I know we have had a number of people from planning who were on planning have either gone to run for council or trustee, and we just have a lot for our small city. A lot of positions to fill.
Well, the decisions are really arcane, I know, because I went and begged for a variance from Jeff the other day, and I was told I probably would never get it, but I could go to the Board of Adjustments, and I gave up immediately, Jeff. So it was already enough to deter me from even trying. But the thing I was looking to do is so arcane, you know, and then you find out international law is against it, and it's a lot to know. That's all I'm thinking. It's an awful lot to know for a civilian who has limited experience.
What were your thoughts about the penalty provisions with respect to noncompliance with commissions or conditions?
Make them higher, make them more money.
More?
More, hit them harder.
Yeah.
Well, remember, it's $100 per day that it continues.
I personally agree with it. This is Bree. I personally agree with it, especially in regards to tenants, because I feel like a lot of the bigger issues are people that don't own the properties and don't really care about how they look, or they don't take the time to take care of it the same as a homeowner would. So I think giving the landlords the ability to help penalize tenants who are not following the city code and get them out of the houses faster if that's an issue. I agree with it. I think it would be a good move.
Yeah, we really felt ourselves in this episode that I described, we really felt ourselves at a loss. Our code currently permits a criminal action. It's like a traffic ticket, a citation type of action against an owner where they can be fined up to $100. Well, big deal. A lot of people who don't want to comply with the conditions will just pay the $100 fine, and it doesn't correct their non-compliance, and it doesn't really get us anywhere. So that was the only remedy we had, short of looking for an injunction from the courts. And that's why we went in this direction to see if we could, you know, I got to tell you, I've been here 11 years and we've given dozens of variances out. This is the first time I can recall somebody obstinately refusing to abide by the condition. I mean, here we are going out of our way to accommodate them, and all we ask them to do is do something to ameliorate the impact of their development so that their neighbors aren't bothered by it. And in this case, we got somebody who just decided, I'm not going to comply. And so it's unfortunate that we had to go in this direction, because like I said, for 11 years, we never had this kind of an issue.
I had a suggestion for the criteria for special exceptions. And I know they're very general, but I didn't see anything concerning the impact of the proposal on the floodplain. And I just thought with our comp plan update and all the emphasis on flooding, that could be an additional criteria to consider.
The very first one is considering the suitability of the property for the use desired. And I would think that, while I don't have any problem with adding a specific reference to the floodplain, but I think that that's a catch-all that allows us to look at unique features of any particular property. And if one of those happens to be a floodplain issue, we can use that to either approve or deny or condition a special exception for that reason. But I don't have any problem if you want to add something about floodplain. It might lead to other things that you want to be more specific about too. It's almost better to leave it generalized, I think. It's going to catch all possible issues that come down the pike.
Along those lines, I have a question, just in general. If someone is making an appeal to the board, do they have to provide new information, a new case, or do they just say, hey, I got turned down here, what do you think? How does that work?
Well, first, what we're talking about now, when we're talking about appeals, the appeals are from administrative decisions of the staff. So for example, Jeff says to somebody, no, you can't have a certificate of occupancy for this property because it doesn't comply with the zoning code. And the person thinks it does comply. So they appeal to the Board of Adjustment for a review of that ruling. And at that time, they come forward with whatever evidence, whatever testimony, whatever photos they have to convince us that the staff was wrong. And we just make our decision from there. So there's no specific legal standard there because it's fluid. It depends upon exactly what they're appealing from. And you just have to look at it at that point and make a decision. We don't see many of those, I will tell you. But it has come up once or twice over the last several years.
Thank you.
I've had another little thought. If we're going to suggest 2 people, if you can't get 2 people, which could happen in this situation because of the commitment to do it, there needs to be a provision that it can still operate without those 2 people.
Typically, we'd say that a majority membership of the board is a quorum. So if only the mayor, the lawyer, and the engineer show up, you still have a quorum.
You have a quorum. Okay, fair enough.
As it stands right now, 2 out of 3 is a quorum. But if you have, let's say it's the mayor and me that show up and the engineer's on vacation or something, and if it's a 1-to-1 vote, the application is turned down. You have to get a majority of the board to get your approval.
All right, any other discussion, questions?
Madam Chair, I had a couple comments that had come up in the Planning Commission's earlier iterations of this section prior to the changes regarding the Board of Adjustment makeup and the penalties. And in our previous discussions, we had suggested changes to 230-57B 1B. Which I don't think is being, and it's minor in nature. Currently, it reads the 230-57B1B. Currently, it reads the Planning Commission or the historic, the nature of the section is a special exception shall not be granted by the Board of Adjustment unless and until. And under B, it states the Planning Commission or the Historic Commission has reviewed the application and forwarded a favorable recommendation to the board where such review is required under this chapter. And we had talked about taking out the language regarding favorable recommendation because it seems to imply that it can only make it to the Board of Adjustment after a favorable recommendation by the Planning Commission. And that can't be the case. Your role is just to make a recommendation, whether it's favorable or not, or whether you decide to not make a recommendation at all. So we had language in our previous reviews that revised that section. And we also tweaked the language about the Historic Area Commission where they would only review it where it was applicable under this chapter. And the language that we had discussed before, and Dan, I'm glad you're here. The language we had discussed before at previous meetings with the Planning Commission would revise the language to require all special exceptions to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. As it's worded right now, regardless of the favorable language, it's worded such that only certain special exceptions have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. And it would be my recommendations that while we're in this section and changing special exception criteria, that we make it clear that all special exceptions be reviewed by the Planning Commission for a recommendation.
Chris, I'll comment on that, Chris. I'm just not certain that that's absolutely necessary because obviously there's some delay involved if an application has to go to the Planning Commission. And many of these are not all that complex. Remember, the big distinction to draw between a special exception and a variance is that one is legally permitted by code, the other is not. Okay, so a special exception use, a good example of that is like a home daycare. In the code, in virtually all the different zoning sections, you'll see that a daycare is permissible subject to a special exception. And then it will list out the requirements for that. You have to have some outdoor play space. There has to be, I think it's 50 square feet of play space per child that you have. So it's kind of routine things that are very objective that you can piece together and say, yeah, they check that box, they check that box, they check that box. You've got your special exception. So I question whether or not you really need Planning Commission approval for every special exception that comes down the pike. Not just approval, but just a recommendation. So, I leave that. It's above my pay grade. I'm just here to make suggestions and recommendations. I'm not here to dictate anything. But it's something that strikes me that that may be a bit overkill, that we really don't need it. I mean, I don't know if we've run into any situations in my tenure here where there was a feeling of a great lost opportunity because a special exception didn't get reviewed at the Planning Commission sooner. But if that's something that the Planning Commission feels should be in here, you can include that with your recommendation and council will do with it as it wishes.
It seems like at least the word favorable recommendation should be removed. So in that case, forwarded a recommendation to the board where such review is required under this chapter, leave the rest of it.
I'd be fine with that, of course.
All right, anything else? Would anyone like to make a motion? And I think it can begin. Planning Commission makes a motion to recommend the ordinance with the following considerations. Is that good language? And then list the changes that we've been discussing.
Should be fine.
So I can make the motion. What is that? I'm sorry, what was it all I was supposed to say?
Planning Commission moves to recommend ordinance number 534 to City Council with the following considerations.
Okay. So the Planning Commission moves to approve the ordinance with the following conditions. Ordinance number 534. We made the recommendation to change the number of individuals to 2 individuals for the Board of Adjustment members for resident individuals at least.
Along with solicitor, engineer, and mayor, correct?
Oh, yes, along with solicitor, engineer, and mayor, who are currently in place on the. Did you want to make the same recommendation about the flood zone, Gail?
I would like to see something included. I mean, at least they can consider it. Oh, okay. Let's see. So as another consideration, consider the effect of the proposal on the capacity of the floodplain to carry floodwaters.
Consider, so we recommend to consider the effect of the proposal on the floodplain.
Yes, that's fine.
And then the only other one was that, were we supposed to make the recommendation on approving the portion about the fines and the liens on the property?
You don't have to address that separately unless you want to make a recommendation to change it in some fashion.
I don't believe there was any discussion to change it, so I think that's fine.
But you do want to get in Chris's and Gail's suggestion to amend 230-57B1B to delete the word favorable.
Okay, so we also make the recommendation under 230-57. Under
B1B.
B1B, to remove the word
Favorable
Favorable.
from that section. Yeah.
from that section.
Okay, it sounds like we got a motion.
I just have one question. Are we, Bri, I'll ask you since you're the one who suggested it. You said why not 2 instead of 4? Do we think changing this to add citizens is a good idea? Because we could say, we recommend you don't, but if you do 2. You know what I'm saying? If you don't, unless you don't agree with that.
Are you asking me, Ms. Betty?
I don't know who I'm asking. I think I'm asking Bri because she made the motion, but yeah.
Madam Chair, I would just, as a point of order, you typically get into discussion once it's seconded. So
Oh, I'm
I would,
sorry. My
no,
mistake.
that's fine. So if you want to ask for a second,
Ask for a second. Would anyone?
Second.
All right. So now we have a second discussion.
That was my discussion.
All right. And your
My thought was, are we saying 2 because they said that they wanted to change it? I mean, my understanding is that not everybody on the city council wants to change it based on what I've heard, but do we really think this is going to add value? I mean, we could say, you know, we think you shouldn't, but if you do, we suggest 2 rather than 4. But I don't know if you all agree with that or not.
Well, I mean,
Well,
I
I
just
think-
personally think we have some very passionate people who may want to be involved, but you know, to earlier discussions, we may have trouble even filling those spots. So I think at least having the opportunity to have those spaces available for residents would give them, I think, a better feeling about the board and about the decisions that are made on that board personally.
I'm getting texts from our mayor who asks me to state to you that he thinks putting civilians on this board is a bad idea. I've now done what he did out of respect.
All right. Other discussion.
if they can't find citizens to fill the positions, is it okay to continue the way it is? I mean, I know the beats to get people to join other commissions. It can be a stumbling block. So my question is, unless you're volunteering specifically to fill a spot, you're being asked to do so by the mayor or who had and council to do so. Is there like a caveat to saying if there's nobody willing to fill these spots that it can just operate based on the current format?
I'll answer that one. If you change, if the council changes the composition of the board from 3 members to 5, and we have trouble filling 2 seats, as long as we still have a 3-person quorum, we can conduct business. But if we fall below 3 parties on a 5-member board, now we're in gridlock. We can't do anything until we fill up some seats.
Chris, do you have experience in other municipalities with citizen boards or combination boards?
This makeup of the Board of Adjustment is fairly unique to me. So it was the first time I was exposed to it here in Newcastle with the city attorney, engineer, and the mayor. I could see both sides. I don't really have, an opinion one way or another. I can see someone wanting a citizen board. Just as an aside, Jeff Berkshire and myself are on citizen Board of Adjustment boards in the city of Newark, and we happen to be in the business, but there is, citizens, on that board. So that operates fine. The city of Newcastle's has operated fine. I don't have a lot of experience in this current makeup.
I did a little research online on Google, which is dangerous, but it seems like there are a number of municipalities, smaller ones, that do have citizen boards. So, I mean, I think I'm fine with a combination. I like having the mayor, the city engineers, and the city attorney. But I could see having 2 citizens as well. All right, well,
I agree.
no more discussion. We have a motion and we have a second. So we're ready to vote. And this is a little difficult over Zoom. So I'm just going to go in order by the pictures I see on the screen. John, you're first.
Okay, I'll go with it. I'll approve it.
All right, Kristen,
I approve.
Cynthia,
Cynthia, you're muted. I'm sorry.
I thought I'd done my duty. Approve.
all right. Bree,
Bree is also muted.
I approve. Sorry.
Sierra,
Approve.
Sierra, are you on the line?
Yes, approve.
Matthew?
Approve.
And I will approve. All right, I think that's it. Kathy, I don't know. Kathy, do you have everything you need for the motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Then moving right along. Ordinance number 535. Chris, can we start with you to give us a little background?
Yes, this is an ordinance that, again, encompasses the discussions that the Planning Commission has been having over the last several months regarding revisions to the ordinance. This ordinance, 535, actually proposes amendments to the city's subdivision regulations. That's chapter 213, as well as the city's zoning ordinance, which of course is chapter 230. So I'll take these in the order that they're in the ordinance 535 and try to give you some background and try not to bore you to death with the nature of the changes. The proposed changes to the subdivision regulations, really the genesis of this was that when we started discussing changes regarding the zoning ordinance to site plan, a planning commission member wanted consideration of minor subdivisions. Those would be subdivisions that would not need to go to the planning commission, but would be able to be approved administratively. And when we got looking at the language of the existing subdivision regulations, we realized that some of the language kind of intended that certain subdivisions of the smaller nature, it was intended, it appeared that they would be administrative in nature, but in reality, we didn't have any record of that ever happening. And what we've done is kind of went backward and tried to clarify that. So what we did is created a definition of re-subdivision in section 213-5, which is really a modification of a lot line that does not create any new development potential. And it doesn't alter a public right-of-way or conflict with the official map from the comprehensive plan. And we had examples of these types of subdivisions actually making it to the planning commission when, in my experience, these are the types of subdivisions that are clearly administrative in nature and would be reviewed by city staff. And the kind of things that you would look for, it's not as simple as you may think sometimes. If Jeff were to receive a re-subdivision plan, he would have to review it to make sure that the resulting configuration of the lots did not create a non-conforming situation or did not create a situation where a lot fell below a minimum lot size or pushed a lot line closer to a dwelling such that now there was a building restriction line violation. So there are things that you could look at that you need to review when reviewing a re-subdivision plan. But those types of subdivisions that are not creating any new development potential typically don't go to planning commissions. So this creates that definition and it deletes the definition of minor subdivision. And now it's clear in the ordinance that any subdivision that creates a new development lot has to go to the planning commission. So we actually went in reverse of what the intent was of the original requesting planning commission member who wanted consideration of a minor subdivision. And the reason it's been crafted this way is that, you know, you besides time and effort and dollars, which is a very important, I understand. You typically create a minor subdivision process when a planning commission's agenda is full and, you know, you have item after item after item, and there's a 3-lot subdivision being proposed that does not propose any new streets. And those are the types of things that jurisdictions typically allow staff to review and approve administratively. In my time with the city, we've never really had that kind of situation where the, agendas have been, crammed month after month with major subdivisions or major site plans. So we thought it prudent to make it clear that any subdivision that creates a new lot, even if it's one new lot, has to go before the planning commission for review and approval. In effect, it's been done that way, for some time. And by these revisions, we're removing re-subdivisions that don't create new development potential from the planning commission agendas, which in my experience has happened in the past. And this change to section 213(7) just makes it's a further add-on that it takes away any reference to minor subdivisions being approved by resolution, since there are no more minor subdivisions. So that's 213. Madam Chair, you want me to go through all the changes or just one at a time and get questions?
Why don't we go through the entire ordinance? Or there's 3 main pieces to it.
Yes. So there's 3 main pieces. The first was to the subdivision regulations. The second piece is to the zoning ordinance, section 5. Section 5 of ordinance 535 addresses changes to the downtown gateway district. And this is back to the original ordinance 534. This is the section that had those criteria, but they only applied to special exceptions in the DG zone. So what this section of this ordinance does is remove those special exception criteria that we just discussed that are now universal to all special exceptions. And given the nature of ordinances, that had a domino effect because of the way the language was intertwined, and we had to make other changes to the ordinance to make it clear that certain uses were permitted by special exception. That is 230-21.1C. That language has not changed in any material way. It's only had to be revised because we had to extract the special exception criteria that's now, if approved by the city council, going to be universal to all special exceptions. So the intent of the changes to 230-21.1 was only to remove that special exception criteria and not to make any material changes to the balance of the requirements of the DG zone. The next change addressed in ordinance 534, section 6. This has had a lot of discussion in the past with the planning commission. And the genesis of this is planning commission members, again, about a year ago, felt that the existing language in the zoning ordinance regarding site plans was inadequate. And site plans are plans that have to be submitted to the planning commission for review and approval for essentially non-residential development or multifamily developments. The existing section, the existing 230-46 is very terse in its guidance. It doesn't give a lot of guidance to the applicant or the planning commission relative to what needs to be included in the site plan, what type of criteria the planning commission should use, what the process should be, should the site plan be approved by city council and recorded after it's approved by the planning commission. So this section 230-46 is essentially all new. So this is creating a new site plan process, providing more detail on what needs to be on the site plan. It provides more detail regarding the planning commission's review and its considerations, i.e. section 230-46E. Those are very general, but it provides you some guidance. Section H allows the planning commission to solicit comments from other departments and agencies. And it makes it clear that the site plan shall be approved if it meets the requirements of this section, attachment 2, and other requirements of the zoning ordinance and other state and federal laws. We added a new section I. We added the idea that, and this is similar to the subdivision regulations, and the intent is that, and we see this a lot and we hear this a lot, that the way it exists, the way the process exists now is that the applicant has to undergo, pretty hefty engineering plans and cost just to prepare a site plan, just to get it in front of the planning commission, having no idea of what the planning commission's feeling or comments may be. So we created a voluntary section in some respects, in that the applicant can submit a concept plan in advance of incurring those heavy engineering costs of preparing a full site plan. Now, we made the submission of a concept plan voluntary, except for developments that require what's called a plus review by state code. And that's section I3. For developments that require a pre-application review per chapter 92 of title 29 of Delaware Code, the applicant shall submit a concept plan to the planning commission prior to the pre-application review. And then the site plan, a full site plan, would only be reviewed by the planning commission once the pre-application review is completed and comments provided by state agencies. And those of you not familiar with that review, it's called the plus review, and it's administered by the Delaware Office of State Planning. And Jeff helped me out here. I think any subdivisions over 50 lots have to be reviewed by plus, and any non-residential development over 50,000.
I think 12 units. It's pretty small.
12 units, okay. So certain, I actually have the cover here. So developments that have to be reviewed by the plus review at the state level, those would have to submit a concept plan. And the idea is that, again, it's trying to be a benefit to the applicant that they're not, incurring all of these heavy engineering costs before they've had, one review by the city approving authority.
So I
And,
just looked it up, if it's more than 50 units or for residential or 50,000 square feet of
Okay.
non-residential, you go to plus.
Right. And plus, you get comments from DelDOT, you get comments from SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. DENREC is there in various capacities. The Department of Housing and Community Development is there. And all of the state agencies provide comments on the plan. And then the idea is that when you receive the site plan for that, if it reaches that level of review, the Planning Commission will have the benefit of having seen the concept plan and also has the comments back from Plus. Also, one of the, I would say bigger changes this section. Again, this whole section is new. It's a major addition to the zoning ordinance. Section M. Now, I don't mean to skip over all the other sections, but so if you have any questions about those, I'm not trying to skip over them. I'm just trying to hit the high points. Actually, it wasn't section M. It was section N that this requires that site plans that involve new streets or dedication of new streets or public rights of way or utilities have to be reviewed by city council and ultimately recorded in the recorder of deeds for the county. And that's a process that the county's been doing for years. The county records all land development plans. So that would be a big change for developments within the city. And what we've tried to do, and I've taken language directly from the subdivision regulations, the intent of the city council's review of subdivisions as it exists today and now for site plans is really, for lack of a better term, a rubber stamp. Unless there's some major problem, if the planning commission has reviewed and approved the site plan, the city council, just generally approves the plan and the plan gets recorded. It's more of a procedural process to really legitimize the recordation of the plan in the land records as opposed to the city council weighing in any material matter and overriding, the planning commission's decision to approve the site plan. Having said that, we do have provisions that we took from county code that allows the county council to refer the plan back to the planning commission. And that's in section N2 on page 9 of the ordinance. Excuse me, 9.
3.
N3. City council may refer the plan back to the planning commission no more than twice with specific questions related to the technical compliance with this chapter. So again, the idea is the city council's not there to override. If they have questions, they can refer it back to you for some additional clarification before they approve it.
Is this, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to stop talking.
The bureaucracy is terrifying to me. So I'm wondering, is this normal? Because you could get somebody with a hair on their backside who held it up for another couple of months, so I'm very interested in governing all of it and maintaining the quality of the whole city. But I don't know if these are deterrents to people who would bring in money and bring valuable things into the community as well. So I just don't know if this is normal. I have no terms of reference for this.
Good question. It's normal to have more guidance in an ordinance regarding the process than the city currently has. So one could consider this valuable to an applicant. And actually, the reason that this first came up is that according to a former planning commission member, there was an applicant that didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to start. And this discussion and this section was generated to really to provide more guidance and specificity to an applicant. So that's the process. Regarding the recordation, it's done in the county. So any developer or engineer doing work in Newcastle County is going to be very familiar with this process. That is recording a land development plan that's not a subdivision.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in because this really originated with Planning Commission because there wasn't a lot of specifics about what was required. And, you know, exhibit 2 or whatever, the list of what planning expects to see rather than having an applicant come in and not really know. And then we say, oh, but where's your landscape plan? Or what are you doing about this? So now they know up front, well, these are the things that we'll be looking for when you come to see us. And the fact that, and we have had people come with their concept plans to review it with us. And it's just really a minimal amount of information just to get a feeling before they spend all the money with the engineers, et cetera, about, you know, where planning will stand. So, yeah, this has been through a lot of review by Planning Commission as well as Chris and Dan and others. But are there questions, comments? There's a lot here.
Do you care about typos? I found 2.
Sure.
Page 3, A2. There's a space missing in the last sentence, and accepted. Just to prove I read it. And then on page 4, at the top, the little 3 lines at the top, Newcastle Roads is missing a space.
Yeah, I need to get that first one from you, please, again.
Sorry.
213.9A2, is that what you said?
Section, yeah, 213.9A2. There's a space missing between and accepted in the last line.
Ah, very good. Okay. And the second one, I'm sorry.
Second one's in the same section in 5. Again, the last line, Newcastle Roads. It needs a
Thank you.
space.
Funny, it's strange that the spell check didn't pick up either of those. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Actually, there's one on the previous page 3 at the bottom, the city. It's that block format,
Yeah.
A5.
I learned a new word. I thought plat was a typo, but it's not. I had to look it up. So I learned something today.
And I had a few clarifying suggestions, at least for me. I found some places in 230-46 where it was saying planning commission approval, like this would happen after the planning commission approved. And when with the addition of section N where we're recommending, but council is actually making the approval, I thought that should be clarified. And so the references where I saw that was in 23046A, 23046K1, 23046L1, 23046L2, where it says after the planning commission approves something, then like the year starts, but it really can come back to us 2 more times, right? So it just seemed like that should be clarified since we're not approving. So I'm looking at, for example, I'm looking at K1, construction of required improvements. There's upon approval of a site plan applicant, so secure necessary construction permits. Before commencing, applicant may construct only such improvements as have been approved by the planning commission. And with section N, I just found that a bit confusing. That we were recommending. So does it start after our recommendation or does it start after council approves?
I may defer to Mr. Lasco on this, but the way I understand the county's language, which I borrowed from regarding city council review, is that city council review, like the county council's review, is almost a concurrence with the planning commission's approval. And I still had the feeling that it's still the planning commission's approval. And it's, just the legislative bodies concurring with that so that so it can be recorded in the clerk's office.
That's a fair way of putting it. I mean, the idea here is that somebody has the proper zoning for their project, whether it's a residential or commercial development. They come to the planning commission with their plans. And if they can establish for the planning commission's satisfaction that they have satisfied all of the city code requirements with respect to parking and building heights and setbacks, et cetera, well, then the planning commission approves it and represents to city council that this meets our zoning code. This meets all of our code, right? At that point, city council's decision is ministerial. They don't have the discretion to say, well, I don't care if the planning commission found that this meets our code, we're going to reject it. It doesn't work that way. They meet the code, they're permitted to use it. Your job is to make certain that they've met all the code requirements. And once they do, council rubber stamps it with an ministerial approval just so that the plan can get recorded. And we put on the public record what exactly is permitted to be constructed here.
Okay, so I mean, and I'm all right with that as long as I'm just reading it, and once most of the words were changed to recommendation and then the final approval, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, the one distinction in item N there is you will see that it refers to approval will be by ordinance of city council if the site plan includes creation of new streets or dedication of land for streets and public ways. So you can have a site plan for a already subdivided parcel of ground that doesn't involve new streets, and that approval is done at the planning commission level without a city council ordinance. But if we're going to create a new River Bend development or something like that, that's going to have internal streets, Now an ordinance is required.
Right. So what is, so I'm back to 1. So what is number 2 then? Where it's by resolution of city council.
That, again, your site, this is one where you have approved a site plan, and now it's simply a resolution to rubber stamp it. That's the ministerial decision,
Okay.
as opposed to a discretionary decision. With an ordinance, council doesn't have to approve anything. That's purely discretionary. But they won't have discretion if you've got a property that you want to develop and it perfectly complies with every aspect of the code. At that point, council can't say, sorry, I don't like your idea here anyway, we're going to turn you down. They've got to approve it.
All right.
To your point, Gail, I think there's some stray language in there in 2. When the site plan does not include site improvements or the establishment of new streets, I think the site improvements doesn't belong because that's too general. That's, any site plan that has, private internal parking lots, those could be considered site improvements.
Right.
So I think that's a little misleading. I would suggest, and, I wrote this, and I think I borrowed that from the subdivision regulations. So I think that should read, when the site plan does not establish, new streets or dedication of land for public purposes, approval will be by resolution.
Okay.
So strike site improvements or, is that what you're saying?
When the site plan does not establish, no,
Or include establishment of new streets and public way, right?
yes,
So we just dropped the 3 words, site improvements or. When the site plan does not include establishment of new streets or public ways. That's how it would read then.
yes, that's it.
Okay, got it.
All right, other discussion? Question? Would someone like to make a motion? All right, well. I can make a motion. I'll make a motion to recommend ordinance 535 to city council with the change of, where are we? 230-46 and to eliminating site improvements or. There a second?
I second.
Any discussion? We've got a motion and a second. All right, let's vote. Cynthia,
I approve it.
Don,
I'll approve it.
Kristen,
I approve it.
Bree,
I approve.
Matthew,
Approve.
Kiera,
I approve.
Kiera,
I approve.
and I approve. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Madam Chair, I understand you're going to be moving on to the more exciting portions of your agenda. May I be excused?
Yes, you may be excused. Thank you so much for, it was very helpful to have you on tonight.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Have
Thanks,
a good
Dan.
night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Chris, if you want to continue on, you can, or you can be excused.
I'll hang out for a little bit.
Okay, great. Let's see, training. I think most of us took the Planning 101 course. Is there any feedback or comments?
I found it to be very educational. I thought it was very good. They did a good job and they gave you a lot of references. So I think it was very, very good.
Right. We had the experts on the 2-hour Zoom. We had the head of state planning and I forget the other presenters, but they're all very good. I thought they did a nice job in 2 hours. So it was well.
Is it Ed O'Donnell?
Yes, Ed O'Donnell.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was good. It was not Max Walton. Max wasn't available that day, but it was someone else from his.
It was Aaron Shapiro, I believe it was.
Yeah. Yep. That was it.
I would love to do it if it's ever happening again.
You know, I think it might not be until next January or February. I think they do it once a year, but we can check. It's through the Biden School at the University of Delaware. And it was Zoom. So it was very helpful. And I decided to sign up for a class on Friday on land use law, which was another 2-hour Zoom. And that one was taught by Max Walton, who's very good. But just to give an overview of some of the things to look out for and the Delaware cases that have resulted from land use situations. So it was very good. I can send you the information, Cynthia, on the school and some of their offerings. Moving on, projects, charging stations. John?
Yes, charging stations. That was a subject that came up at the last council meeting, and it looks like they're in a process of determining the final locations for the remaining 5 dual charging stations that they have on hand. They have a number of locations on a short list. Looks like 2nd and Chestnut, which we've discussed, the Sailing Club, the Wharf, which I understand the Wharf is already provisioned. That should be a fairly straightforward installation the way it was in the 3rd Street lot. Gray Street lot, of course, Veterans Triangle, and I don't see it discussed, but I don't know if the Senior Center is still under consideration. I tend to think that would be a good location. Also, as I say, of course, George is not in attendance tonight, but he was looking into the grant funding for the level 3 chargers, which I think are more appropriate for locations such as the farmer's market, where you have a shorter dwell time. People might only be there for 15 minutes, so you can get a substantial charge, something at your level 2 chargers that we've installed already couldn't accomplish in that span of time. So March, believe it or not, is upon us, beginning tomorrow. And George Velastakis said he was going to work with Scott Blomquist on the Municipal Services Commission for the grant applications for those chargers. We don't want to miss that this year, for sure. So, and Gail, you had also mentioned in the last meeting that the governor's climate action plan allocated 1.4 million for those chargers as well. So that's really the next step. It looks like we're coming for the time being. I think the remaining 5 chargers might be sufficient given the number of electric cars Just my own personal observations of the Third Street lot where we have 2 dual chargers installed. They're not that often where I see all 4 chargers are populated. That's typically unusual. I usually see 2, maybe occasionally 3 cars there. So we might be okay in that respect. And of course, down the road, longer term, we want to discuss providing the opportunity to charge the people who do not have off-street parking and perhaps want to have a charger closer to their house. And as I've discussed in the past, I've talked to a company out of Berlin, New Jersey, Berlin, Germany, not New Jersey, Ubitricity, who have a really slick setup where they have the level 2 chargers that they hide inside of existing lampposts. So to address the concerns of the historical appearance of it, it wouldn't be, because we couldn't put the SonaConnect chargers, of course, right on the street in front of the courthouse. I don't think that would go over very well. So it looks like moving ahead. Again, councils, they're going to make final determinations for the remaining 5 chargers, and our next big step in this, it looks like determining where we want to put the level 3 chargers, the fast chargers.
And I know Hack is looking at the issue, and maybe they're dealing more with the on-street parking situation. Matthew is our new Hack representative from Planning Commission. So I have seen it on their agenda. So Matthew, maybe you can fill us in on what Hack's talking about after you start attending the meetings.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm meeting with Laura Wednesday just to kind of get up to speed on things. So yeah. One thing I noticed, and maybe you noticed it as well, John, in the city council meeting, it seems like city council was trying to determine whether these chargers are for people visiting the town or for existing residents. I don't know if that really kind of came up.
Well, the answer to that is yes and yes. If somebody's going to be visiting town, they're going to be at Jessup's or Norlees for a while, they could get a substantial, a decent charge from the level 2. So it would be both. And again, that came up with the 1 charger that has been installed other than the 3rd Street lot, which is at the old Pizza History. I think that's Chili's Wings now, was installed. And that concern was raised, it's only a level 2 charger, but there do happen to be a lot of residences in that area, people that could serve. So it serves both purposes. It depends on the type of, I guess, location. If somebody's going to go to a restaurant, they're going to tend to be there longer than if they're going into, say, Walgreens. So they do serve both purposes, both for residences and for people. Because bear in mind, people aren't driving into town for the most part completely out of juice. But if they say, hey, there's a charger, I could get a little top off at least. So it will give
will that have an impact on with now with the access to, or the possible access to the level 3s, will that have an impact on strategically where the 3s go, where the 2s go, and who's going to make that final determination? Is that
that's something ultimately it would be council. Again, we can make the recommendations, but I would say areas like the farmers market, because that's trustee land a lot. Most of the retail locations in town, of course, are private. So I guess we can make recommendations, say, for example, the River Plaza. But it would be locations like that where you don't have a long dwell time. Somebody's going to come in for 10, 15 minutes and they're going to be on their way, but they want a decent charge. The level 3 is the way to go.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else on? Well, master transportation plan, I have not heard anything, so I am assuming soon. Since a few of us are on the advisory committee, that we'll be getting a report to review, but don't have any update on that. Comp plan, I did talk to Chris Rogers. We need to do an annual update report for state planning on our comprehensive plan. And we heard all about that in our Planning 101 course. And it's due, I think, by the end of June. And I've asked Chris to come to one of our meetings, and we can go through the goals and just discuss where we stand on each of them. So he agreed to do that. One of the ones where we don't have anything else in front of us for approval. All right, any comments from commission members? All right. Yes.
Yeah, this is not necessarily planning commission related, but it's more city related. I had the opportunity to attend the first of the scheduled 3 Your City, I think they're called, events being held at the Newcastle Library. And it's just a great opportunity to just kind of connect with some of the things that are going on in town, and you may learn some things about some groups or organizations that you didn't know about previously. Just a thought for anyone who's fairly new to town. You can spread the news, or even those of us who've been here a little longer. So it's just a nice event to support.
Thank you.
And there's two more scheduled. The schedules in the weekly, I don't have it in front of me right now.
All right, anyone else? Any commissioner comments? Marika, public?
Yes, we have Phil Gross and we have Joe Day. So I will bring in Mr. Gross first.
Thank you.
Mr. Gross, you are on.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me? Hey, thank you for all you do. It's greatly appreciated. Like you're saying, it's kind of a thankless job, but the three things that I want to bring up are just, I feel that in relation to 534 ordinance change, I just really feel that it's pushing towards another revenue stream. And I guess you can't just have people doing what they want without any kind of repercussions. But I just think there's got to be a way around that, because $100 a day, and your council even felt that was light, which I disagree with, but I would really consider not doing that, or at least giving a longer period of time before it goes into effect. So that was the first thing. Second thing, when it comes to the tenant being tied into it, you've got a cross problem, because I happen to be a tenant, and if I go to the landlord because there was a citation dropped off and the landlord chooses not to, honestly, I'm not a lawyer, but I would be willing to bet that that's not enforceable on the tenant. And you're going to have a big legal problem, more so than if you just had it for the owner of the home and went after him. And then last but not least, I think for the public comments at the next council meeting, I think your board's recommendations, coupled with the general public comments, I think should go back before your board before council votes, because in the history of at least the last year, council having the discussion before a vote, it's been totally, not once has it factored in any public comment. I can tell you not one comment from the public has been factored into their vote. And you guys at least have good discussion over the details, including Miss Batty. She's just really into the details. And I think it's good for you guys to get it back before council votes on it. That's all. And again, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And we also have Joe Day, so I will bring him in.
All right.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. I won't take up much of your time. I know it's been a long day, but I wanted to at least address a couple points on ordinance 534 that I don't believe that my true intent was adequately conveyed. But first, I'd like to say my employment has nothing to do with this ordinance. I'm not sure why that was brought up, but it has absolutely nothing to do with this ordinance. Fundamentally, I believe that the residents of Newcastle should be making the land use decisions for the city of Newcastle. The ordinance doesn't take out the city engineer or the city solicitor out of the process. It puts them both in an advisory role along with the planner. The engineer and the planner would prepare a written recommendation for the Board of Adjustment, and they advise the members of the board. This does a couple of things. One, it gets the city planner involved with the Board of Adjustment, who really has not had a role before, but it also takes the solicitor off the board. So then the solicitor doesn't have any issues representing the board. It's kind of odd to me, and I don't think it puts the city in the best position where the solicitor is actually on the Board of Adjustment and then would have to represent the Board of Adjustment. So that was a couple of the points. This is nothing new. The city, just a few years ago with the mayor involved at the time he was on council, took the professional off of Hack. We removed the professional architect from Hack and we replaced him with a citizen. And then the architect now is in an advisory capacity. So as far as other towns and jurisdictions, at least around us, Ellesmere, Delaware City, Middletown, Newark, and Bellefonte all have citizen boards. I just wanted to bring those points up so that everybody heard it. Again, I realize you already made your recommendation. Obviously, I didn't get to testify, and I didn't feel it was appropriate to be texting members during the meeting. So I just wanted to have those points out there. Again, we govern ourselves with Hack, with council, and everybody else. I think sometimes we underestimate how many good, intelligent, reasonable people are in this city who are willing to serve. And that's all I wanted to say, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We have one more person, Matthew Alexander. I'll let him in.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Alexander? Go
Hi,
ahead.
yeah, thank you for letting me speak, and thank you all for your consideration of the issue. I would echo a couple of Councilperson Day's comments. I think that I think concerns about there not being enough people who want to serve or would be qualified to serve are overblown. It's a small town, but I think the issue there is more council could do better sometimes to reach out to let folks know what's going on and how they can get involved. And that's an issue for council to deal with. I would also comment on the issue of renters. I work in the rental housing market on the government inspection side, and I know under the Delaware Landlord Tenant Code, generally any code issue that there is with a property is ultimately the responsibility of the landlord under the law. And then that landlord has their right to take up damages or issues they think are tenant caused with the tenant to try to get made whole from that. So I don't think that any language enabling particular enforcement against tenants for code issues would be advisable. Thank you all for your time.
All right, and thank you for your comments.
There is no one else.
Now I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it. My second in.
All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Nice to meet
Thank you.
y'all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in love next week. Next month. Next month, sorry.